Well, thanks very much, Mark. It certainly is good to be back here again in these familiar surrounds. I pay my respect to the traditional owners and acknowledge their elders past and present. I also acknowledge Chris Brown, the Deputy Chair of IPA, and Brendan, the Executive Director. Mike, over here, you will know, is Mike Murdoch is the new Secretary of the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, and because that's not big enough, he also is still the Commonwealth's Coordinator General in charge of the Nation Building Program rollout. And Lynn, the Deputy Secretary, is next to him, and I'd invite you to take the opportunity to introduce yourselves, particularly to Lynn today. Mike will be very familiar to all of you, and I've been very pleased that he's come on board as the Secretary of my department. My theme today is urban policy. This is a topic that dared not speak its name at the Commonwealth level for a period of time, notably the initial part of this decade. But I believe the need to pay attention to the state of our cities is now more urgent than ever. By the year 2056, Australia's population is expected to reach 35.5 million. The number of people living in our cities is projected to increase from 13 to 23 million. Contrary to the way that Australia is seen in some parts of the globe, we are the most urbanised country on earth. We need to respond as policymakers to that challenge. Brisbane and Perth's population by the year 2056 will grow by 120%. This great city and Melbourne will each have 7 million people. The race is on, therefore, to determine which will win, quantity or quality. We indeed must, for the good of the nation, ensure that there's a victory for quality, not just an issue of quantity. Our cost of living, our egalitarian culture, our economic productivity, as commuters indeed, as our sanity, our very way of life, in fact, all these are at stake. The quality of life in our cities is an issue that we, as a nation, of course, have confronted before. And I would argue it's in a fine Labor tradition of responding to those challenges. In the 1970s, of course, we had the creation of the Department of Urban and Regional Development. We had the great soaring of our outer suburbs, to name one, absolutely critical gain that was made as a result of DIRD and was certainly continued in the initial period of the Fraser government. Secondly, in the 1990s under Brian Howe, we established the Better Cities program, looking not so much at the outer suburbs but looking at the regeneration of our inner suburbs, how we could revitalise these cities. And certainly much gains were made there. Today we have a different challenge. It's a whole-of-government challenge, and it of course is the challenge of sustainability as we move to a carbon-constrained economy. And I believe an important step in that is the creation of a national urban policy. Australia needs a policy framework that will assist the Commonwealth, the states, the territories and local government, as well as the private sector, to create cities which are productive, livable and sustainable. And that is the charter of the Major Cities Unit that we've established as part of my department, located here in Sydney in the Infrastructure Australia building. Success in advancing these objectives will involve overcoming some reluctance to accept Commonwealth involvement on behalf of the states and indeed some local governments. To some extent, we must overcome parochialism In some ways, we shouldn't really be surprised that urban policy has often been absent from the national government's agenda. Cities have always been jealous of their autonomy from the centralised state, something that goes back to the era of the city-state and the city corporations in medieval times. In return for loyalty and taxes, cities were granted independence. Not a bad deal. But in the modern age, cities and national governments have to reach new understandings. The issue isn't autonomy, that should be taken as a given. Let me assure you that no national government wants responsibility for deciding where to lay sewerage pipes or what to do about the local DA application. I certainly don't. The real issue is the role of the national government in ensuring sustainable development, proper planning and strategic investment in social and physical infrastructure. Importantly, a renewed commitment to our cities should complement an ongoing commitment to the economic development of our regions. That is why the Rudd government is providing record support and investment in regional Australia at the same time as we embark on this new direction and involvement in our cities. Implementation of the Regional Development Australia Network will empower regional communities and ensure that the benefits of economic growth are shared across our vast nation. Indeed, the former government's aversion to investing in our cities ensured some regrettable outcomes for both our cities and our regions. One of my criticisms of the former government's AusLink program was that it invested in regional roads and rail until it got to the outskirts of cities and then forgot about the important task of how those extra kilometres were got, of getting goods to the port or dealing with urban traffic congestion once the highways were channelled into the cities, particularly our major cities on the east coast. The Rudd government is taking an integrated approach to urban and regional development that is required. Today I want to outline what I think some of the major challenges are to be overcome. The first is the potential damage that bad urban policy can do to the egalitarianism of our cities. Suburbs will always be socially diverse. There's no getting around that. But as our cities expand, this problem may get worse. We must ensure that a child growing up on the outer fringes of this city realistically has the same life chances as one growing up in an inner suburb. This is an important objective, given that today 1 in 8 Australian children are growing up in the fast expanding area of Western Sydney, more than all the children in the whole of South Australia and Tasmania combined. Now, to some extent, we've always been separated by postcodes, but postcodes in themselves are just numbers on a page. They're not the physical barriers in the way that a 50-kilometre stretch of freeway is. We have to design our cities in a way that ensures distance does not exclude people from full social and economic participation in our society. That requires an honest approach to issues such as urban consolidation, issues to be confronted which are politically difficult, but they need to be confronted in a bipartisan way. They need to be confronted in an honest way if we're not going to have increases in social divisions, increases in inequities, an increasing example of determining income based upon where you live. We need to address these issues. Yes, they're hard. Yes, they're hard. But politicians of both political persuasions need to, and I write off the Greens in this regard, because their position on urban consolidation, the hypocrisy is extraordinary. But politicians of political parties that seek to lead the nation and the state need to be prepared